All right, I want to welcome everyone to today's session. We're going to go ahead and get started. Um, Today, we're going to be talking in today's insight session about the Stratum Analyst Hub, importing data into Stratum. My name's Adam Kurtz, and I'll be guiding you through today's session where we'll be talking about how to import data into Stratum using the data import feature that Stratum provides through the user interface. We'll talk how to set some of that stuff up. We'll look at some of the Excel formats of the data coming into Stratum, and then we'll talk about those processes of importing data, whether that's transaction-based or budgetary forecasting or master data also is a part of the feature as well. So we'll talk about both processes, and then we'll look at a demo, and we'll take any questions you might have. Today we'll be talking about the Analyst Hub. So that's part of getting data into Stratum, which would be on the left side of the pinwheel here, and we can see that the spreadsheet import, master data augmentation, those are the two different methods of getting data into Stratum through the Analyst Hub. And so we'll talk about those two features. This is a rather busy slide going from left to right, but basically kind of highlights the data going into Stratum. Traditionally, we see that data normally gets imported from ERP database tables. So that, obviously you're probably doing that now. As we can see down below, there's Excel and other types of data that might be available within Excel, like budgets or forecasts, sales plans. So now we have a way for users to get that into Stratum using the user interface. And then down below is the ability to get cloud sources into Stratum as well. And that's a separate topic in itself. The data import access is a licensed feature, so that's something that you do need a license for. If you're not familiar with your licensing, you can certainly contact me, and we can kind of tell you what you're licensed for, and if you might need a license for this feature. And it has to be on SQL Server. So this is something that if your Stratum database is on an iSeries, this is something that requires that your Stratum database must be on Microsoft SQL Server. And you have to be on 7.1 or greater. So if you're not on a prior version of that, you would need to be upgraded before you can use this feature. Data import is generally a feature that's for power administrators or power users. So security and view administrators have full permissions to this feature if they are licensed for it. Advanced and casual users can access some of the data import features, but the administrator would have to give them direct access to the data import window. So it is a bit limited for other users other than the security and view administrators. And of course, this is not something you'd want to roll out to just every user. So there's that. The category that you're going to use for this data import process must be set up as a user-controlled category. And that's something that is actually driven through the interface. So we can see that through the some of the administrative menus, depending on your version. You would then need to designate whatever category you're going to use for your data import. And we can see here that we've chosen sales plan as our category for our user controlled category for the data import. So, what is data import? Essentially, it's data that's housed in Excel. It's typically something that again, is like sales plans, budgets, forecasts, but it could be anything as long as you have some method of storing the data and having some sort of time phrase to it. It must be bucketed to a certain degree. And then you can import directly into Stratum using the interface's data import features. And again, demographics, budgets, plans, market trends, weather. I doubt some of that would what you'd want to bring in, but again, like I said, it doesn't matter as long as again there's some sort of timestamp that we can use to import and bucket that data and put it into the appropriate time buckets that it needs to live in. What's nice about this is that the user is user driven once it's all set up, and then there's not a lot of setup. And then the users can actually drive this process in which then they would get emailed when the data is ready. It actually runs immediately. So this is something that the user can expect to see within minutes of importing the data. What does this do? Well, it does empower some of your users, your analysts, your power users, helping them, giving them more autonomy to bring in the data that they see fit and to refresh that data as needed or update it as needed. So it really gives them more power as data analysts and data scientists. The data import is launched from the left panel of some of the older viewer user interface versions. So anything that is prior to 7.3 would be this menu would be accessed through that left frame menu. The data mapping window that you'll get through the data import process will guide you through configuring and importing the data from Excel. And you'll see this in the demo. It's rather easy. There's some AI built into it so that it knows how to map some of the data once you've already told it how to map it. Some of the formats that you can use to import the data into Stratum, as you can see, this is a horizontal format, but you can have a transaction-based format as well. But what I've seen out there in my experience, many plans, forecast, budget type formats are typically horizontal, where the time periods are moving across in columns. But transactional is available as well. If you have a record out there with a timestamp on it, like I said, as long as it has some sort of timestamp, we can import that data as needed. And here's an example what the transaction-based format would look like. Again, depending on the version you're running, it's going to depend on how you're going to get to the data import menu. So here on the visual, we can see on the over to the far right is the more recent version, where you can go into that data import menu through the hamburger menu, which would be in the upper right hand side of the interface. So you'll see that in the demo today. And some of the prior versions has the old admin utilities menu. So that, as you can see, data import would be accessed through that. Once you get into the data import menu, you will see all the prior jobs that you've submitted in the past. And then you can then, if you want to kick in a new job, there's a new button there, as you can see, illuminated in green, where you can go ahead and click on that and browse for your file that you want to use to import your data. So you'll go ahead and make that selection, select your file, and then there would be some answers that you would need to provide to tell the configuration how to handle the process. Is it going to be new data? Are you going to add it or replace the data that you have in there? What target category are you going to use? What format is the file? And then it goes into asking some questions about the header columns, or I'm sorry, the header rows that you have. How many are there, and which row contains your timestamp? And what does the timestamp look like? So again, you're going to need to have these answers, and you will. If you have, if you're intimate with the file, you'll know some of the answers to these questions. Once you answer those questions, the file then gets imported into the designer, and then you can go ahead and make your mappings, telling it which columns you're going to use for dimensions, and then which columns are the data measures. And again, you'll do this one time and it will remember it so that you don't have to completely do this every time in terms of going through the mapping exercise. Once your data import is ready, you can go ahead and verify and process. And it will verify your data. And if it's good to go, you can go ahead and kick off your process. You'll then get an email telling you that the process is finished and you're ready to go in and look at the data. And here we have a view where I can then go in and analyze and look at the data that I just imported into my view. Here we can see that the master data import access, we've kind of talked about this in terms of who has access to it and licensing. There's another type of data import. So that's your data import that you'd want to use for transaction-based data with timestamps on it, right? But what if you have a file? What if you want to import an attribute? or something along those lines. And again, you now have that ability. So you can import data. Perhaps you might have an attribute about a product or a customer. This is something that you can use that may not be available within your ERP, but you do have it within an Excel file. Well, you can go ahead and use your Excel file and import that to populate that attribute. And again, who can access same access requirements? You have to be a security or a view administrator to get the full permissions to this. But I kind of talked to you about what it is. Obviously this is from our help text, so this kind of goes into a little more detail. But you can go into the help text of viewer to read up more further on user controlled attributes. But essentially, you'd have to set up, similar to the category, you'd have to set up an attribute to import the data into, so that the interface knows what to use and how to import that data into it. So there's some things that you would need to go through to set this up. The file that you would look like here, for instance, I've got a file for all my products, and then I've got a marketing code that I want to assign to my products. Maybe I'm running a promotion and I want to assign this code to each one of the products that I'm running the promotion for. So here I can then go ahead and use my data import feature to map that data in. And in this case, we're going to be mapping in attributes instead of actual measures, so that I can tell it what dimension to use and which attribute within the file to use. And then once you import it, as you can see down below, I can then run the view and I can aggregate on the attributes. So the attribute itself becomes a dimension that you can aggregate on. And here I can see all my marketing promotions at an aggregate level. So it's pretty cool how it does that. That's me, that's my name, and that's my email address and my phone number. So if you need to contact me, you can go ahead and make a screenshot, jot it down, do whatever you need to do. But you can contact me to talk further about whether you're licensed for this and how does this work. I can also give you a demo and we can talk more details about the data import features. All right, let's look at the demo. How do we do some of this stuff within the interface? And as I'm running a more current version, I'll be using my hamburger menu up here in my upper right hand corner, where I can go into my analyst tools and then select my data import feature. So here we can see that data import and master data import are both available here. We'll go ahead and do a data import first. So here's all the prior jobs that I've run in the past. If I want to kick off a new one, I'll click on the new button and I'll select the folder that I want to use for my file. And then if I wanted to bring in a sales plan, I will select my sales plan Excel file. So once I make that selection, it will then, like we saw in the presentation, I need to tell it how to add this data. Is it going to be an add or a replace? Where am I going to put it? What does the file look like? And my file has 3 header rows with the time on the 3rd row there, and my dates look like that. So once I answer these questions, it then reads the file and brings in a preview of the file so I can see the mappings. So here's the designer, and as we can see, my Excel file contains multiple dimensions, and then it is a horizontal file with my plan amount going across in each one of my months is in a separate column. So I've got region as a dimension. I've got sold to, product, brand, product. As you can see, I'm ignoring dimension descriptions. Don't need to import those here. And then for my measures, I've got all my measure columns designated as plan amount across the board. And then here I'm ignoring grand total and some other columns that I have that I want to ignore. All right. Once that's ready, I can click on processing the data. I can go ahead and verify it and kick that off. And then I would then get an email telling me that the data is ready for analysis. Once that's ready, you can then go in and take a look at your data with the imported data within my view. So here's the actual data I use to import this is the data I use within my file. So if we were to look at the file that I use for my sales plan, we can do a quick review. We can see that, my dimension here's this is the file that I used, region 330, customer sold to, um, it's only the East region, I think, that we imported this data for. Yep. If we were to look at a total, we can see that grand total down here is roughly, what is that number? 175 or something along those lines. That's for the entire thing. So if we were to look at that further, we can see that we can show all. So this is the entire file. And there's that number 175,079. So that's the number is footing. So that's good. We like to see that. Um, and so that's a good thing. And then, we can drill this all the way down to the product level. So here's all that data that I've just imported. And once you have that available, then you can once you start getting your actuals, and you can start doing your comparisons versus your sales plan versus your actuals. And we can see, then we can add in a variance and do a variance calculation. So we can do some stuff like that. Let's see. Just want to make sure I don't miss a question. So if you have a question, raise your hand. You can use your chat features as well. I just want to make sure I don't miss any questions this time. Okay, so that's their data import. So I just imported my sales plan through the interface. So that's one way to get data in. And then if you if you wanted to import a marketing code or an attribute, let's take a look at that. So I've got another one here for my attribute import. So I open that file and I can see that I've got a list of products that I want to attribute my marketing code to. So I've got a couple of marketing codes I want to attribute to these products. So that's what my file looks like. So what would we do for that? Again, if I go back into my analyst tools, I will then use master data import to import that data. And I will click on new and I will go grab that item file. And then it imports the master data in, and I can do the same thing. I can map in, for instance, this is for my dimension of product, and then I will have an attribute that needs to be set up, just like we did with the category. There's a little bit of setup that needs to occur so that you have an attribute to pump this data into and map it to, and then you would kick that off. And then once that becomes available, you can then go in and um, look at that data. So for instance, if I were to look at this same file, I can then bring in my marketing code and I can then see how that data was attributed to my marketing codes. I can go to the product level and I can see that um, if I drill into a given product, I can see the marketing code that it was attributed to. Or I can aggregate completely on the marketing code. I can get rid of the filter here. And I can see that there's some of the plan data must have items in there that doesn't have a marketing code associated to it. So that's why we get a question mark for some of that data. But here I can aggregate on the marketing group code for my sales plan amount. And that wasn't even part of that file. So that's because it attributed the marketing group code is an attribute at the product level. So as long as some products were in that file, so we can see how it can roll up to those marketing group codes. Isn't that cool? And that's a custom attribute that we can then do some drill downs on. So if I want to see all the items that for a given, where am I running this promotion, for what items that roll up to that, these are the plan amounts, again, based on the items that were in that file. So here we can see all the items for marketing group code 1238EK based on the plan file that we imported. Kind of cool. So again, you're being able to import the actual plan data itself, and then also being able to import a attribute that you can then use as a dimension to aggregate your data on as well. It's pretty fantastic. If I wanted to then add in that attribute at the product level, I can do that as well. And there it is. So it's a bit redundant, but I can certainly have that available as a column, as an attribute column at the product level.